He smirked when the lawyer opened the folder. Just a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, but I saw it. My son always believed he was the smartest person in any room, and especially in one with me. The conference room was colder than it should have been. I kept my coat on. My hands stayed folded on my lap, knuckles swollen from arthritis, veins standing out like blue ropes. Across from me sat Gavin in his tailored gray suit, the same one he wore when he wanted to look impressive, but not flashy. To his left, Dana, his wife, tight-lipped, fingers flying over her phone like she had something more important to be doing. Maybe she did. I hadn't seen them in a month. Not since the incident with the nurse. Gavin said it wasn't safe for me to live alone anymore, that the house was too big, that I could consider options, which meant sell the house, move out quietly, and hand over whatever was left. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Ronald Byrne, old but sharp, glasses low on his nose. He looked from Gavin to me with a kind of sad neutrality. "Shall we begin?" Gavin nodded, like this was his meeting. "Yes, let's." The will wasn't news to me. My husband, Arthur, had it rewritten 8 months before he passed. I was sitting right there in this very room when he signed the documents. He never told the children, said he wanted it to be clear, unambiguous, and free of influence. He knew his son, he knew his daughter, and he knew me. Back then, I protested, said it would make things harder, said it might drive a wedge. Arthur had looked at me with that steady calm of his, the one that made you stop arguing even if you were technically right. "Let the truth speak when I no longer can," he'd said. And now, here we were. Gavin leaned back in the chair, already celebrating in his head. Dana didn't even look up. The last time she addressed me, she called me Grace instead of Mom. Said it like a formality, like she was speaking to the help. The will was thick. I remembered that. Arthur had been thorough. Ronald began reading, slowly, clearly, voice measured like a metronome. Legal language rolled through the room, and I watched Gavin's eyes glaze. He didn't care about the preamble. He was waiting for the big line, the inheritance, the house, the accounts. Then it came. "To my beloved wife, Grace Milner, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to the property at 24 Sycamore Lane, all financial accounts, personal belongings, and full authority over the family trust established in 1992. Silence. Gavin blinked. "Wait, what?" Dana finally looked up. The lawyer didn't flinch. He turned the page. "Further, I wish to state clearly that this decision reflects my complete confidence in my wife's judgment and her integrity. I trust her implicitly to act in the best interests of our family." I didn't smile. I didn't even move. "But," Gavin sputtered, that can't be right." "It is," Ronald said. "Signed, notarized, witnessed. Your father was of sound mind." I watched my son's face shift from confusion to disbelief to something sour and low. He wasn't heartbroken. He was humiliated. He stood up abruptly. "We'll contest this." Ronald raised one brow. "You may try, but I assure you the document will hold." Dana placed a hand on Gavin's arm. She was looking at me now, but not like a daughter-in-law. More like a stranger trying to size up a variable she hadn't accounted for. I stayed seated. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't explain. "Is that all?" Gavin asked, voice sharp. "For now," Ronald said. "The rest concerns distribution should Mrs. Milner predecease her beneficiaries." "Fine," Gavin snapped. "Let's go." They left without saying goodbye. When the door closed behind them, the silence rang like a bell. Ronald looked at me. "You all right?" I nodded. "Yes." He started to gather the papers, then stopped. "You know, most people would have warned their children, told them what to expect." "I know. And you chose not to." "I chose to let them show who they are, without the filter of expectation." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Outside, the wind had picked up. October always brought a certain kind of chill to Vermont, not just in temperature, but in memory. Arthur's death had come on a day like this, when the leaves blew across the porch in gold and rust, and the air smelled like wood smoke and endings. But today didn't feel like an ending. Today felt like a start. I didn't go straight home after the reading. Instead, I stopped by the bakery on 4th. It was silly, maybe, but I wanted something warm, something I chose for myself. 2 lemon scones and a small coffee. I sat by the window, not really hungry, just watching the street, listening to the clink of ceramic and the rustle of brown paper bags. No one said my name here like it was an inconvenience. By the time I got home, the answering machine light was blinking. 3 messages. I didn't check them. I knew who they were from. I took off my coat, changed into my house shoes. The floor creaked like always. Same boards Arthur and I laid ourselves in, 83. The kitchen smelled like apples. The bowl on the counter was still full from last week's trip to the orchard. I'd gone alone. Gavin had said he'd take me, but the weekend got away from him. I made tea, sat at the table, and finally played the messages. First one, Gavin. His voice was sharp, but pretending to be calm. "Mom, we need to talk. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, and we should clear it up. Call me." Click. Second, shorter. Dana. Her tone colder. "Grace, we'd appreciate a conversation before this becomes more complicated. Please respond." Click. Third, Gavin again, less polite. "I don't know what Dad was thinking, but this isn't acceptable. We should be managing the estate, not just you. Call me back." I didn't. I stared out the kitchen window at the backyard, the crooked lilac bush, the rusted bird feeder, the stone bench Arthur built. I hadn't changed much since he passed. I liked it that way. Things stayed where you remembered them. I didn't expect him to leave everything to me, but I wasn't surprised either. We'd built this life together. We paid every mortgage payment on time. I clipped coupons. He fixed gutters. We didn't talk much about trusts and estate planning until the last year. But once his heart got worse, he'd started making quiet arrangements, the kind that come from a man who's already accepted his exit. Still, I thought he might leave some part to the children, not out of obligation, but to soften the blow. I was wrong. At 8:14 p.m., the phone rang again. I answered it. "Mom," Gavin said, relieved I'd picked up. "We need to get together." "No." There was a pause. "No? I'm not going anywhere tonight, Gavin. Then I'll come by." "No." He sighed hard into the phone. "You think you can just do this without including us? That this is fair?" I held the phone away from my face for a second, looked at it like it might answer for me. "Dad made the decision, Gavin, not me. But you agreed to it. I respected it." Another pause. "This house isn't even practical for you anymore. What are you going to do? Keep living alone until you fall down the stairs?" The venom slipped through his voice, masked as concern. I'd heard it before. Usually when he wanted something. "I manage fine. We just want to help, but it's hard when we're shut out." I smiled faintly. You weren't shut out, Gavin. You were expecting control. His voice raised. We're your family. No, I said calmly. You're my son. That doesn't entitle you to ownership. He went silent for a moment. I imagined him pacing in their kitchen, Dana nearby mouthing instructions. His pride had taken a hit, and he didn't know where to aim the blame except at me. You'll regret this, he said finally, coldly. It's not going to go the way you think. I'm not thinking about how it will go. I'm thinking about how I'll live. And I hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I went back to the table and finished my tea, though it had gone cold. In the drawer under the phone sat a folder. Arthur had labeled it in his careful handwriting, Trust Materials. I took it out, ran my fingers over the edges. Inside, the papers confirming what the lawyer had said, and more. A fund, a discretionary account, contingencies. Arthur hadn't just trusted me. He'd equipped me. There was a letter, too, unopened, addressed in his familiar script. For Grace, when the will is read. I didn't open it that night. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I knew this. Gavin had never feared losing a parent. He feared losing a grip. And Dana, well, she'd never hidden her opinions. When we bought this house, she called it quaint. When Arthur got sick, she suggested a home. When I wore my navy dress to their anniversary, she'd asked if I had anything more modern. I was never going to fit into their version of family, but I didn't need to. That night, before bed, I stood at the window and watched the street empty. Leaves skittered across the pavement. Porch lights flicked off one by one. My house, old, uneven, full of silence, stood steady as ever. And so did I. They showed up unannounced the next morning. I was in the garden, clipping back the asters, trying to get ahead of the frost. My knees didn't like the crouching, and my back protested, but I found peace in pruning. It was the kind of task you could finish, not like parenting. That never ended, even when it probably should have. The sound of tires on gravel made me pause. I looked up. Gavin's SUV. Sleek, black, too big for the narrow drive. Dana was in the passenger seat, arms crossed. She hadn't even bothered to get out when the car stopped. I stood, slowly, wiped my hands on the apron I wore more out of habit than need. Gavin slammed his door shut and came toward me like he had something urgent to solve. "Mom?" he said. Not a greeting, an opening move. I nodded. "Gavin." He looked past me toward the house. "Can we go inside?" I shook my head. "No. We'll talk here." His jaw clenched. He hadn't expected that. For years, he'd walked into this house like he still lived in it, as if everything in it would always be his to inherit, eventually. Now he stood on the lawn like a visitor. Dana got out of the car then, slowly, deliberately. Her heels crunched against the gravel, her expression unreadable. She didn't bother with small talk. "We're here because we're concerned," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "About?" "You," Gavin jumped in. "About what Dad's decisions mean for you. About whether you're equipped to handle all of this." All of this. As if the life I'd lived for 78 years had suddenly become too complicated for me to grasp. "I see. We should be managing the accounts," he continued. "You don't even have experience with investments or—" "Your father didn't think so," I said. "He thought I was perfectly capable." "He was sick when he made those changes," Gavin snapped. "You think that's not relevant?" "Careful," I said quietly. "You're suggesting your father was of unsound mind. That's a serious claim." Dana stepped forward. "We're not accusing anyone. We're asking for a reasonable compromise." "No," I replied. Gavin blinked. "What?" "I'm not negotiating control of my own life or your father's wishes." Dana looked like she'd rehearsed for this. Her voice got soft, persuasive. "Grace, we just want to help. What if something happens to you? What if you're taken advantage of?" "I was," I said calmly. "For years, but that stops now." She flinched. Gavin went red. "I've paid for your children's school trips, the leak in your roof, the lawyer for Dana's brother, quietly, without making a scene, because I thought I was helping my family." Gavin opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "I see now what that bought me. Expectation, not gratitude." He stepped closer. "You think we don't appreciate you?" "I think," I said slowly, "that you confuse love with ownership. That you believed this house, this money, this life would eventually be yours. And that my staying alive too long is a problem." "Don't say that," Dana cut in. "That's not fair." I turned to her. "Isn't it?" She didn't answer. Gavin looked down at the grass, kicked a fallen leaf. "We could go to court, you know." "You could try." His head snapped up. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm tired of being threatened." Dana took his arm. "We should go." He resisted for a second, wanted the last word, but there wasn't one to give. I'd said what I needed. They walked back to the car in silence. I watched them go, not triumphant, not bitter, just still. When they drove off, I sat back down on the bench by the asters. My heart was thudding a little harder than I liked. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, let the October wind cool my face. Inside, I put on the kettle. And for the first time in years, the silence in my kitchen felt like peace, not loneliness. Later that day, a letter came in the mail. From Ronald, the lawyer. Not urgent, just the final formal copies of the will and trust documents. I filed them in the drawer under Arthur's photo. I stood there a moment, looking at him. "You'd have handled them better," I murmured. But he hadn't been the one left behind. I had. And I was finally learning how to stand. The letter from Marilyn arrived 3 days later, written in careful cursive on heavy cream stationery, the kind she used for thank you notes and Christmas cards. She never called unless it was absolutely necessary. Marilyn preferred to curate her communications, like her living room shelves, all color-coordinated hardcovers she'd never read. "Dear Mom," it began, "I heard about the will. Gavin is upset, of course, but I wanted to reach out to you directly before things get unnecessarily tense between everyone." Unnecessarily. As if tension was some accidental weather pattern, not something her brother had whipped into a storm the moment his name wasn't called. "I understand that Dad's decision surprised all of us," she wrote, "but I'm sure he only meant to ensure you'd be taken care of. Still, with everything going on, maybe it's worth talking about how to move forward in a way that benefits the whole family. I'd love to come by and discuss options." Options. That word again. A gentle word with sharp edges. I left the letter on the counter and went about my day. I didn't rush to reply. I didn't owe speed or softness. That evening, the phone rang. "Mom," Marilyn said, as if we'd just paused a conversation moments ago, not weeks. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all," I said. "I just sat down with a cup of tea." "Good," she replied. "I was hoping we could talk. I sent a letter." "I received it." "And?" I sipped, let the silence stretch just long enough. "I wasn't sure what you meant by options," I said. "What are you proposing?" "Well," she began carefully, Dad left everything to you. Of course, that's his right. But you know how things are. Gavin's dealing with a lot right now, and you have more than you need. Do I? She hesitated. I mean, the house, the accounts, the trust. It's a lot to manage at your age. Maybe there's a way to delegate, make it easier. I leaned back in the chair, looked out the window. The hydrangeas were wilting now, curling inward like old paper. You think I'm overwhelmed? I think it's a lot of responsibility. I ran a library for 30 years, I said quietly. Balanced budgets down to the last dime, navigated renovations, city council, insurance claims, thefts, and more teenagers than I care to count. Your father and I paid off this house with no help. I didn't ask for anyone's hand then. Why now? Mom, she sighed, this isn't an attack. No, I agreed. It's a retrieval. Silence again. Then her voice, cooler. You think we're all just after money? I think you're not used to the idea that I don't need saving. That's not fair, she said sharply. I'm trying to keep the family together. By asking me to give away what your father left me? You're being difficult. I smiled. No, I'm being clear. She was quiet. Then, you always favored Dad. You followed him like his shadow. And he left me everything, I replied. That ended the call. I sat in the quiet after, letting the ache in my chest rise and fall without panic. It was an ache of sadness, not fear. I had wanted Marilyn to be different. She was always the polished one, the girl who corrected my grammar at age 11, who told me I embarrassed her when I wore denim to the recital. I thought maybe, with Arthur gone, we'd find new ground. I was wrong. Later that night, I opened the folder again, pulled out the letter Arthur had written. The envelope was stiff from time, the flap sealed gently. I opened it with a knife from the drawer, carefully, as if it might break. His handwriting. Still steady. Still his. My Grace. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hate that. I hate leaving you with the noise I know will follow. I've seen it coming for years, not because our children are cruel, but because they are entitled. We taught them self-reliance, but they learned inheritance. That's on us. Maybe on me. I want you to know that I trust you. I know you'll do what's right. That doesn't mean pleasing them. That means protecting yourself. You gave up more than your share for this family. Now let this be your turn. Don't let them pull you apart. Don't hand over what you've earned. They'll make noise. Let them. Noise fades. Character lasts. Love. Always. A. I folded the letter slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and closed the drawer. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Ronald's office smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books, the same scent it had 20 years ago when Arthur and I first sat across from him to draft our will. Back then, we were still spry, still working, still imagining retirement as something that involved travel and leisurely mornings with newspapers we'd read cover to cover. I thought it might be a good idea, I said, setting my handbag gently on the floor, to understand exactly what I've been entrusted with. Ronald nodded, hands folded over a leather folder. Of course, Grace. Arthur gave me very clear instructions, and I followed them to the letter. He opened the folder and pulled out several documents, neatly clipped. Aside from the house and your joint accounts, which are now solely in your name, there's the Milner Family Trust, established in 1992. Originally, it was meant for the children's education and long-term needs, but Arthur amended the terms in March of last year. I leaned forward. What did he change? Ronald adjusted his glasses. He named you as the sole trustee, with full discretion. That means the decision to distribute or not distribute any funds rests entirely with you. No automatic rights for Gavin or Marilyn. I blinked slowly. He really didn't want them having control. He trusted you more, Ronald said simply. He also instructed me to tell you this in person. If anyone attempts to challenge your mental capacity or suggests you're unfit to manage, there's a sealed psychiatric assessment he arranged with a court-appointed doctor. It clears you, preemptively. I was quiet for a long moment. The weight of it pressed gently on my shoulders. Not heavy, but undeniable. Arthur hadn't just shielded me. He'd fortified the walls. And the trust itself? I asked. How much are we talking about? Ronald smiled softly. Including compounded interest? Just over $2 million. I let out a small breath. Not surprise. Not greed. Just the kind of awe you feel when you realize someone loved you so fiercely they planned your safety down to the decimal. I'd like to leave most of it alone for now, I said after a pause. But I want to make a few designations. Charitable, educational. He nodded. We can begin that process today. As we went over the forms, I found myself recalling the way Gavin once spoke about the fund, casually, almost carelessly, when Arthur was still alive. He'd assumed, I now realized, that the money would transfer to him by default. That being the son, and a successful one at that, meant it was a given. But Arthur had seen further. He'd seen how his children treated aging not as a fact of life, but as a weakness to exploit. Ronald offered me a cup of tea as we signed the initial forms. It felt strange being waited on by a man who used to seem so much older than me. Now we both moved more slowly. Now we both understood time the same way. As a narrowing hallway. When everything was notarized and sorted into envelopes, Ronald stood and walked me to the door. If I may, Grace, he said gently. Arthur admired your steadiness more than anything. I don't think he ever told you that. He didn't need to. Ronald smiled. Still, I think you ought to hear it. The walk to my car was slow, not from fatigue, but deliberation. The town moved around me as usual. A teenager darting across the street with a skateboard, a mother tugging a toddler along by the hand, a dog barking from an open truck bed. All ordinary, all unchanged. But I had changed. At home, I made myself a modest lunch, tomato soup and toast, and sat by the window to eat. The light coming in through the lace curtains struck the kitchen table in a warm angle, the kind that made the steam from the soup look like it had weight. I thought about calling Marilyn, telling her the truth. Letting her know how deeply Dad had fortified the walls she and her brother kept trying to knock down. But I didn't. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about space. Space for me to exist outside of their designs. Later, I went to the back room, the one Arthur used as his study, and opened the cabinet he kept locked until the year he died. Inside were boxes of papers, blueprints, photo negatives, small tokens he'd saved that no one else ever saw. I pulled out an old envelope labeled St. Joseph's Fundraiser and found a photo of the two of us from 1986. Him in a blazer that didn't quite fit, me in a dress I'd sewn myself. We were laughing. Caught mid-laugh, actually. It was the only photo where I saw myself the way Arthur must have seen me. Not as a caretaker or a quiet support, but as a full person. Solid. Certain. I kept that photo out, propped it against the lamp by my bedside. Not because I needed a reminder of the past, but because it was time to step forward into the rest of the story And this time, I would not be silent in it. The letter came by courier, thick envelope, legal header. Notice of intent to request evaluation of mental competency. No return address, but the intent was clear. I read it twice before setting it down. My hands didn't shake, though my stomach went hollow for a moment. Not from fear, but from something colder. Recognition. This was where we were now. Not just worried children. Not hurt feelings. They were trying to take me apart with paperwork. I called Ronald. He answered on the second ring. Grace? Yes, I said. I received a letter. Gavin's filing for a competency evaluation. There was a pause. Then he didn't listen. No, I said. He didn't. Ronald exhaled. It's harassment. We'll handle it. I want it handled quietly, I said. No courtroom, no press, no drama. I'll file a response and send them the psychiatric assessment your husband arranged. That should stop it cold. Good. We didn't need to say more. Ronald knew the shape of this family by now. I thanked him and hung up. The envelope still lay on the table. I left it there. A monument to their last attempt. That afternoon, I heard a knock at the back door. Only one person used that door. When I opened it, there he was. Jordan, Marilyn's boy. 19 now. Tall and lean, with the same restless eyes Arthur had at that age. He held a brown paper bag in one hand. Hi, Grandma, he said, a little sheepish. Jordan, I smiled, stepping back to let him in. What brings you here? Mom doesn't know I came, he said. Neither does Uncle Gavin. I just wanted to see you. I took the bag from him. What's this? Chocolate croissants. Your favorite, right? They are, I said softly. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea while he unpacked the pastries. I heard about the will, he said after a few sips. Did you? Yeah. Mom was yelling about it on the phone. Said you were being manipulated. Said you weren't thinking straight. I looked at him. And what do you think? He met my eyes. I think you've been thinking straighter than any of them for a long time. I laughed quietly. That's a dangerous opinion in this family. He shrugged. I've got a mind of my own. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. The sun came through the window, warm on the tablecloth. I noticed how easily he fit here. How little he resembled the entitled posturing of his parents. I remember you teaching me how to make biscuits, he said. You let me knead the dough even though I was a mess. You were 5, I said. You thought the flour was snow. He smiled. It was the first time anyone let me ruin something on purpose. I smiled too. Jordan finished his tea and grew quiet. Then he said, Grandma, if they make things worse, I just want you to know I'm on your side. My throat tightened. You're my family, he added. Not just a legal name. I reached across the table and took his hand. Warm, strong, a little calloused. A boy becoming a man. Thank you, I whispered. He left soon after, promising to visit again next week. After he was gone, I stood at the door for a long time watching the yard. The leaves had started falling hard now. Whole branches went bare overnight. I thought about the past weeks, about Gavin's voice raised on the phone, about Marilyn's carefully worded letter, about the threat of courts and evaluations. I thought about Arthur's photo on the nightstand. Then I went to the desk, opened a new folder, and wrote on the tab, Jordan. Inside, I placed a blank form Ronald had given me, a document to name a successor trustee, someone I could pass the responsibility to when I no longer could manage it myself. I didn't fill it out that night. but I had a pen in hand and a very clear view of the future. The invitation came by text message, not from Gavin or Marilyn, but from Gavin's wife. Family dinner Sunday, just the 6 of us. 6 p.m. Gavin says, please come. Please. That was new. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I understood them too well. This wasn't a dinner. It was a campaign, a public relations event wrapped in linen napkins. Still, I said yes, not because I had hope, but because sometimes you attend the play not for the performance, but to witness how poorly the cast remembers their lines. Sunday came with overcast skies and a restless wind. I wore a dark green blouse Arthur used to like, plain slacks and flats. Nothing grand. I brought nothing, no dessert, no wine, and arrived precisely at 6. Their house was a monument to overcompensation. Every surface polished, every corner curated to look effortless. Dana greeted me at the door with a smile too wide. Grace, so glad you could make it. I stepped inside. Gavin was already in the living room, a glass of something amber in hand. Mom, he said, and there was an edge of performance in it, like he was waiting for someone to take his picture. Marilyn was there too. She hugged me with that awkward quickness that says, let's pretend we're still a family. Jordan hovered by the fireplace, hands in his pockets, eyes wary. His presence was the only thing that felt sincere. Dinner was roast chicken, green beans, and some kind of glazed root vegetables arranged like a magazine spread. We ate in stilted conversation. Dana spoke about her Pilates instructor. Marilyn mentioned a new campaign at work. Gavin talked about property taxes, subtle reminders of financial burdens. Then the plates were cleared, and it began. I think, Gavin said, folding his napkin deliberately, we've all had some time to think about everything. I nodded. Yes, we have. We overreacted, he continued. When the will was read, it was a shock. Emotions ran high. Marilyn chimed in. No one's blaming you. We just want to move forward. Dana placed a fresh glass of wine in front of me. Together. I looked at it, then at them. What does moving forward mean, exactly? Gavin leaned back. Sharing management of the estate. Us helping you navigate decisions, financial ones. So, control, I said softly. No, he said quickly. Support. You want access to the trust. Gavin's face tightened. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Silence. Marilyn finally spoke. Mom, you're getting older. We worry. And because you worry, you believe I should hand you the keys? No, Gavin said again. Just give us a seat at the table. You had a seat, I said. For years. You left it empty. Jordan shifted uncomfortably. Dana cleared her throat. What if something happens to you? Do you have a plan? Yes, I replied. I do. I reached into my purse and laid a folder on the table. What's that? Gavin asked, frowning. Legal documentation, my capacities certified by the court, succession plans, restrictions on the trust, all finalized. He looked stunned. You had this ready? I came prepared, I said. You invited me to a conversation. I assumed it had terms. Marilyn picked up the folder, skimmed the top page. Her face paled. You really don't trust us. I trust Jordan, I said quietly. The rest of you have proven otherwise. They stared at me then, a silence blooming in the room like spilled ink. Finally, Gavin stood. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I'm correcting one. Jordan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at me with something like quiet respect. I rose from my chair, took my purse, and nodded once. "Thank you for dinner." And then I left, not with anger, not with triumph, but with peace. Because for the first time in a very long time, I had said what needed saying, and nothing more. It started with phone calls, not from Gavin, not from Marilyn, from neighbors, old friends, acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. "Grace, dear, I heard you've been unwell. Are you getting the care you need? I ran into Dana at the market. She mentioned you were having memory issues. I'm so sorry. I can't believe your kids are having to handle everything now. That must be hard on them." Each time I thanked them politely. Each time I felt the sting of implication. They weren't checking on me. They were checking a box. Because someone, or several someones, had started a campaign. Whispered narratives disguised as concern. The kind of poison that doesn't taste bitter until it's too late. I didn't answer most of the calls after that. I didn't go to Sunday church. I didn't attend the book club at the library. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. But still, I felt it. The echo of their silence in the grocery aisle. The sudden drop in volume when I entered the post office. The sideways glances, rehearsed expressions of sympathy. My children wanted me invisible, failing, dependent. And they were willing to paint the picture themselves when reality didn't cooperate. One afternoon, as I stood at the produce stand, choosing apples, I heard it again. "Poor thing," someone whispered behind me. "Must be so hard losing your judgment like that." I turned. The voice belonged to Alice Bernard, whose son had borrowed money from me in 2014 and never repaid it. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, and she smelled faintly of stale perfume and self-righteousness. I held up an apple. "Still know a good one when I see it." Her eyes widened. "Grace, I didn't mean—" "I know exactly what you meant." She flushed, turned away, and scurried toward the bakery. I bought my apples and left. At home, I sat in the sunroom, looking out at the garden. October was ending. The air had that brittle edge, the kind that reminds you winter's waiting just behind the curtain. I thought about calling Marilyn, asking her if she'd told people I was losing my mind. But I didn't need the answer. I already knew. Instead, I called Ronald. "I'd like to write a statement," I said, "to be kept on file." He paused. "For legal purposes?" "No," I said, "for peace of mind." I wrote it that evening, longhand. Simple, clear. To whom it may concern, I, Grace Milner, am of sound mind and judgment. I am aware of recent rumors circulating about my health and mental state. I am not confused nor in decline. I am simply a woman whose adult children have mistaken inheritance for entitlement. I ask that those who know me, truly know me, believe in the consistency of my character more than the fragility of gossip. Thank you for your concern. I don't need it. Grace. I didn't send it. I placed it in a box along with Arthur's letter, Jordan's school photo, and the psychiatric assessment. Because I didn't need to defend myself. But I wanted to remember that I could. That same week, I got a letter from the Women's Auxiliary. They wanted me to renew my board membership for another year. A small gesture, maybe. But it reminded me that not all doors were closing. Some were still open, and some I was opening myself. The article appeared on page 2 of the local paper, just below the fold. Former librarian donates $100,000 to Community Literacy Fund. There was a picture of me standing outside the town library, shaking hands with the director. I was wearing my navy coat and the brooch Arthur gave me on our 25th anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years. It caught the light just right. I didn't tell anyone beforehand, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't owe an announcement. I had decided, after Ronald helped finalize the transaction, that the first significant gift from the Milner Family Trust would go to the place where I'd spent 34 years of my life. The place that had welcomed children with no books at home and mothers who read with their coats still on. They were going to use it to build a new children's wing, with windows that actually opened. I thought it was a fine use of money. Gavin did not agree. He arrived without warning the next morning. No text, no call, just the sharp slam of a car door and his angry silhouette crossing the lawn. I didn't invite him in. We stood on the porch. The wind whipped at the hem of his coat, and his hair was mussed, too hastily combed, like he'd left the house mid-sentence. "You gave away trust money?" he asked, skipping any greeting. "I allocated it," I replied, "to a cause your father would have supported. You didn't even tell us." "I don't need to." His jaw tightened. "It's not just your money, Mom." I tilted my head. "Isn't it?" He stepped closer. "Dad built that trust for the family. And he named me the trustee. Sole discretionary. You're squandering it." "No," I interrupted. "I'm protecting it. From entitlement. From the idea that your last name is a blank check." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think this makes you righteous?" "No," I said calmly. "It makes me free." His voice rose. "What about our kids? Their futures?" "You mean Jordan?" I asked. "The only one who visits me without an agenda?" He blinked. "You're angry," I continued, "because the future you planned, the one where I quietly faded into a guest room while you took over the estate, is no longer happening." He said nothing. "You call it family legacy, but what you mean is control. I'm trying to protect what's ours." "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're trying to reclaim what was never promised." He looked down at the porch boards, then back at me. "This won't end well," he said. "For who?" I asked. His silence was the only answer. He turned, walked down the steps, and got into his car. He didn't slam the door this time. He didn't even look back. I stood on the porch a while longer, breathing in the cold. Across the street, Mrs. Cranwell was raking leaves into uneven piles. She looked up, waved. I waved back. Later that day, the library sent me a thank you letter, handwritten in blue ink, with a note from a child attached. "Thank you for giving us more space to read. I like the owl rug the most. Sam, age 7." I pinned it to the fridge. There are many kinds of wealth. The one I inherited wasn't just numbers on paper. It was the right to decide what mattered, and I was finally using it. The letter came certified, heavy envelope. My name typed cleanly on the front. Inside, a notice from the Bank of Northfield. Subject: Milner Discretionary Asset Authority. Final phase activation. I read it twice before calling Ronald. "You didn't mention this," I said. "I wasn't allowed," he replied. "Arthur left it sealed unless certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" "Legal challenge, attempted removal, character defamation, all of which have now occurred." I held the phone against my shoulder and looked out at the backyard. The lilacs were almost bare. "What does it mean, Ronald?" "It means the bank is transferring full control to you, not just over distributions, but structure. You can dissolve parts of the trust, reassign beneficiaries, create sub-funds, rename the entity entirely if you wish." I sat down. "You're telling me I own the whole tree?" "And the roots," he said gently. There was a silence between us. Not empty, thoughtful. "What would you like to do?" he asked. "I'd like to speak to someone at the bank," I said. "I have ideas." The call was scheduled 2 days later. A woman named Eleanor handled the trust accounts. Her voice was clear, respectful. She didn't ask why an elderly woman in Vermont wanted to restructure a family trust. She asked how she could help. "I want to create a scholarship," I told her, "in Arthur's name, for adult learners, people over 40 returning to school, especially women." "That's a beautiful directive," she said. "We can make that happen. And I want it to be permanent, irrevocable, even after my death." She explained the legal steps. I listened, took notes. When we were finished, she said, "Mr. Milner left several discretionary notes, personal observations. He wrote that if anyone could carry the purpose of the trust beyond the letter, it was you." I felt something shift inside me, a warmth under the ribs, not pride, not sadness, just clarity. "He knew you'd wait," she added, "until it truly mattered." That evening, I walked the house slowly, as if seeing it new. The marks on the wall from where Gavin ran his toy trucks, the scuff on the kitchen tile from Marilyn's dropped baton, the dented doorknob Arthur always meant to fix. It was all still here, all still mine. But I didn't feel ownership the way they did. I didn't want to hold it. I wanted to use it. By the end of the week, the paperwork was filed. The Milner Trust would fund 5 scholarships per year, renewable, for adults with no family support. Anonymous, need-based, open to the overlooked. I didn't tell the children. Not yet. But I left a note in the drawer next to Arthur's photo. "I kept your name, love. But I gave it away the right way." That night, I sat with a cup of tea, no television, no lights, but the lamp beside me. And I thought, not about what they'd taken, but about what I'd reclaimed. They came on a Wednesday. No warning, no partners. Just the two of them, standing on my porch in coats too thin for the cold. I opened the door and looked at them for a long second before stepping aside. They didn't hug me. I didn't expect them to. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Arthur built in the summer of '79, stained with tea rings and memory. I poured coffee, though they didn't ask for it. "I didn't think you'd let us in," Gavin said. "You didn't think I'd stand up to you," I replied. He lowered his eyes. Marilyn cleared her throat. "We're not here to fight, Mom." "No?" She glanced at her brother. "We've been talking. Just us. And we know things got out of hand." I waited. "We let it get personal," Gavin added. "We should have handled it better." "You wanted control," I said quietly. "And when you didn't get it, you tried to discredit me." He winced. "We were angry. You were exposed." Marilyn spoke next. "We're sorry, Mom. Really. This trust, the house, all of it, we thought it was going to pass to us. Naturally, we didn't think you'd use it." She nodded. I looked at them. Not as my children, not as threats, just as people. Aging, like me. Tired, maybe. But still trying to navigate the world through the lens they'd always known. That I was the background, not the main character. "You assumed I'd disappear into softness," I said. "That grief would keep me quiet." "We just didn't think," Gavin murmured. "No," I said. "You did. You just thought I wouldn't." Silence settled in. I let it. There was no rush. Then Gavin asked, "Is there any way you'd reconsider? Include us in the decisions?" "You are included," I said. "In the same way I've always included you, as people I care for, but not as shareholders." Marilyn shifted in her seat. "It's hard, Mom. Watching you make choices that shut us out." I looked at her. You mean choices that didn't benefit you? She hesitated. That too. I sipped my coffee. I made you both peanut butter sandwiches when you were sick. Stayed up with you through fevers and bad dreams. Covered rent once. Paid legal bills. Gave without question. I know, Gavin said. But love, I continued, is not a deed transfer. It's not an IOU. We're not asking for everything, Marilyn said quickly. Just something, a part of it. I stood slowly, walked to the drawer, took out the latest report from the trust. Here, I said, handing it to them. This is what I'm doing. Scholarships, local aid, a new wing for the library. If you want to be part of that, you're welcome. But if you're here for a piece of the pie, I've stopped baking. Gavin didn't take the folder. Marilyn did. She flipped through the pages in silence, then said, "He would have liked this. Dad." I nodded. He trusted me to finish what we started. Gavin stood. "We should go." I didn't stop him. Marilyn lingered by the door. "Can we try again? Not for the trust. Just with you." "I'm here," I said. I never left. They walked down the path slowly. No slamming doors this time. Just quiet steps. And when I closed the door behind them, it wasn't with bitterness. It was with closure. The house was quiet again. For the first time in weeks, there were no calls. No cars slowing down in front of the yard. No folded arms on my porch. No sideways glances at the grocery store. Just silence. Dense. Natural. Like a heavy snowfall that hushes the world into listening. I didn't fill it with noise. I let it stretch. 3 mornings in a row, I woke without urgency. I didn't reach for the phone, didn't check the mailbox the second it arrived. I made tea, the loose kind, not the bagged convenience, and sat at the table while the kettle steamed the windows slightly. Outside, the last of the leaves dropped one by one. I watched them fall like closing lines of an old story. It felt right. I began to clean, not in the frantic, busy way grief makes us clean, but in the deliberate rhythm of readiness. I moved room by room, not purging, but choosing. I let things go. Old tablecloths frayed at the corners. Shoes I hadn't worn since Arthur's last Christmas. Knickknacks given out of obligation, not affection. I didn't hold them long. Just long enough to know I wouldn't miss them. In the upstairs hallway, I found a box I hadn't opened since the children moved out. Inside were drawings, ribbons, report cards, Gavin's second-grade certificate for Most Improved Listener, Marilyn's essay on pioneer life, notes they wrote me on Mother's Day when they still had soft voices and sticky fingers. I sat on the carpet and read each one. Not with nostalgia, with permission. I allowed myself to feel it all, the warmth, the ache, the bewilderment that those small, open-hearted people had grown into adults who could look at me as an obstacle. It wasn't bitterness, just a kind of grief I hadn't named before. The grief of being finished with something that isn't finished with you. I kept a few pieces. The rest I bundled neatly and tied with ribbon. Not to throw away, but to store differently, not in the house, but in the heart. Somewhere less cluttered. In Arthur's old desk drawer, I found a list. His handwriting. Faint pencil. Things to tell Grace if I go first. You always did the hard parts, I noticed. Don't let them wear you down. You're better at silence than most men can survive. Use that. The house doesn't need to stay. You do. Love again, if you want, but don't settle for company. Keep your hands busy. It helps. Eat the damn cake. I laughed, not loud, just enough to feel him. The next day, I drove to the hardware store, bought paint. A soft color, something between cream and warm fog. I repainted the back room, took down the curtains, let more light in. It wasn't a reinvention. It was a conversation with myself, with the next chapter. Jordan texted that evening, "Coming by this weekend? Want to help with anything?" I replied simply, "Bring your old clothes. We'll do the shed." There was no ceremony in it, no big gesture. But for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a closing door. It felt like a room I had just decided to walk into. He showed up in jeans 2 sizes too big and a sweatshirt with paint flecks on the sleeves. "Brought the right uniform," I said, handing him a pair of work gloves. Jordan grinned. "Figured we'd get into something messy." We did. The shed behind the house hadn't been touched in 5 years. Not since Arthur's hands stopped steadying nails. It leaned slightly now, like it was tired of holding on. Inside, a universe of half-used cans, gardening tools, a rusted ladder, boxes labeled in Arthur's looping script, "Holiday, Old Wires Keep." We cleared a path first, then pulled things into the yard. I watched Jordan lift without complaint, dust settle on his shoulders, his hair falling in his eyes. He worked like someone who didn't need to prove anything, just wanted to be useful. "You don't have to stay long," I said at one point. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm staying longer." He told me about his job, part-time at a print shop, mostly evenings, about the class he'd dropped, and the one he might retake next term. He wasn't sure yet. That didn't bother me. Decisions made too fast often miss the soul. After 2 hours, we stopped for lemonade. Sat on the porch steps, sweat drying in the October wind. The air was sharp, but not mean. The kind of cold that wakes you up without slapping you. Jordan took a long sip, then said, "I saw the scholarships. In Grandpa's name." I nodded. "I figured you might. They're smart, specific, clear." "Your grandfather hated vague things," I said, "especially when it came to people's futures." He was quiet a moment. Then, "I've thought about applying." I didn't move. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he added quickly. I didn't think I'd be the kind of person who qualified. But reading it, it felt like it saw someone like me. "That was the point," I said. "It's not about charity. It's about belief." He looked at me then. Did he believe in me? "Yes," I said. "But more than that, he trusted you. That's rarer." Jordan looked down at his hands. Big hands now. Capable. "I don't want to be like Mom or Uncle Gavin." "You don't have to want that," I said. "You just have to live differently." He nodded. "Thanks for not turning me away. Back then, when I came after the will." I smiled. "You came with croissants. That buys at least one conversation." He laughed. "I'll keep that in mind." We finished clearing the shed just before dusk. I let him keep one of Arthur's old flannel shirts, the blue one with the tear at the cuff. He said he liked how it smelled. Before he left, he paused by the car. "If I apply," he said, "I'll do it by the book, like everyone else." I nodded. "Then I hope they see you." "They already do," he said. And then he drove off. I stood a while longer in the yard, the last of the light filtering through the trees. The shed stood empty now, bones clean, ready for something new. So was I. I waited until the house was clean, until the shed was empty, until the last of the leaves had fallen and the wind carried only quiet through the cracks of the old windows. Then I sat at the table with 2 sheets of paper and began to write. I didn't rehearse. I didn't plan. I wrote in pen, in my own hand, slowly, not for flourish, but for weight, because I wanted each word to be deliberate, not sharp, not bitter. Just true. To Marilyn, you were born with a quiet frown and a need for precision. I used to marvel at how early you arranged your toys in color order, lined up your shoes before you could spell your name. You were always trying to fix things. Even people, especially me. I see now how hard it was for you to accept that I didn't ask to be improved. When your father died, I thought we might find something new between us. Woman to woman, not mother to daughter. I was wrong. You came with gloves, not to hold, but to adjust, to tighten the parts you didn't like. You spoke of concern, but it was control. You offered compromise, but only when it served you. I am not angry with you, but I am done performing softness just to keep the peace. You are free to be who you are. So am I, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, wrote her name on the front, nothing more. No address, no decoration. Then I picked up the second page. To Gavin. You used to fall asleep with your fists clenched, even as a baby, like the world owed you something the moment you opened your eyes. I don't say that to mock you. I say it because I know now how early that hunger began. For attention, for validation, for possession. I gave you more than I had to. That wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I hoped, foolishly maybe, that enough giving would teach you generosity. It didn't. When your father left this world, you looked not at his absence, but at what remained. And when you didn't get to claim it, you came for me. You called it fairness, family, legacy. I called it what it was, entitlement. Still, you are my son, and I will always love the boy who once cried when he broke my garden spade because he thought it meant I wouldn't have one anymore. But I am not your property. I never was. Mom, I signed it slowly, let the ink dry fully before folding the page. I didn't mail them. I placed them both in the box with Arthur's letter, Jordan's thank you note, and the first scholarship award confirmation. Not because I was hiding the letters, but because they weren't meant to be sent. They were meant to be said. And now that they had been, in ink, in truth, in silence, I felt something leave my chest. Not anger, not sadness, just weight. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in an old quilt, tea cooling in my hands, and listened to the stillness. I had nothing left to prove, only breath left to take. The house didn't feel big anymore. Not empty, just right. The way a room feels when you finally move the chair to the place it always should have been. Not for show, for sitting. I kept my mornings slow. Tea, always loose leaf. An egg, sometimes toast. No television, just the quiet rhythm of a place kept by hand, broom, cloth, polish. I moved room to room without urgency, pausing often. I allowed stillness to stay a little longer each time. On Tuesdays, I went to the library. They had finished the children's wing, bright windows, low shelves, a rug with owls and stars. The director asked me if I wanted a plaque. I said no. I didn't need my name on the wall. It was already on the lives that walked in. Sometimes I sat near the window, watching the parents read aloud, their voices soft and awkward. Sometimes I read myself. Novels with real women in them. Biographies where the wives finally got a chapter of their own. One Thursday afternoon, during a community meeting, a woman I barely knew, Marlene, from over on East Hill, raised her hand and asked me to speak. I don't know what to do with my son, she said, not with shame, but exhaustion. He's 33 and still speaks to me like I ruined something I never touched. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "You can't raise someone twice." but you can choose not to shrink when they try to make you smaller." She nodded, quietly, and we moved on. Jordan came by every other weekend. Sometimes we painted a room. Sometimes we just drank lemonade on the steps. He told me he'd been accepted into a continuing education program. Part-time, 2 nights a week. Funded, in part, by something that didn't carry my name, but did carry my intention. He never mentioned the trust directly. Never asked what would happen to it when I was gone. He already understood what mattered. That was enough. The letters to Gavin and Marilyn stayed in the drawer. I didn't reread them, didn't seal them. They weren't warnings. They were reflections. True, calm, and finished. I heard little from them. A card at Christmas. No signature. Just from all of us. I didn't resent the silence. Some silences are wounds. Others are boundaries finally being respected. I spoke at one more meeting that winter. Not long. Just enough to say, there's a difference between being alone and being sovereign. I choose the second. The room was quiet after that. Not because they didn't understand, but because they did. One morning in late March, I stood by the kitchen window as the light shifted, just so, through the trees. The garden was waking up. Shoots pushing through the soil like small declarations. We're still here. I smiled, not for anyone watching, not for any performance, just because it felt good to know that I, too, was still here, still full, still in control of what I gave and to whom. Still myself. If this story meant something to you, share it. Someone out there is still waiting for permission to stop shrinking,